The second question I got was actually on probabilities. Construct a Venn diagram and answer the following questions. There are 20 Twitter accounts in a group of 50 teens. 35 have Facebook accounts and 10 do not have an account. One adolescent is chosen randomly. And then we're gonna answer 5 questions on the probability of choosing an adolescent that has, whether it's a Twitter account or a Facebook account or whatever. A Venn diagram, if you don't know how to read one, it is very simple. Basically, what it goes in one circle, in this case, it's going to be Facebook accounts, right? These are the people who own Facebook accounts. These are going to be the people who own the Twitter accounts, all right? All the people's in the circle. And then the people in the center own both a Twitter and a Facebook account. Now, we have 50 teens total. We have 20 of those kids have Twitter accounts. 35 of those, adolescents have Facebook accounts, right? And 10 of those kids have no accounts and they're happier than everybody else. Now, the problem is, if we look at the numbers right off the bat, we realize that 20 plus 35 plus 10 is more than 50, right? Like 20 plus 35, that's 55. We're talking about 65. How in the world do we have 65 kids, but we only have 50, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have to figure out where do we place them in here, because it turns out that obviously then it has to mean that some people have both a Twitter and a Facebook account, all right? So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna place the ones that don't have any accounts, which is 10 of them, right? So we know that the entire universe is what we call it here. 10 of them don't have an account, which means that they're not gonna be here in the circles, right? So I'm gonna put 10 kids out here. That leaves me with 40 kids or 40 teens that have between Facebook and or Twitter accounts, okay? And now we have to figure out, well, how many of them only have Facebook, how many of them have both, and how many of them have Twitter accounts, right? Whew, all right, get ready, because this is gonna get nasty. No, I'm kidding, it's not. We know that the ones that own a Twitter account are 20 of them. The ones that own a Facebook account are 35 of them, which means that this entire circle has to add up to 35, and this whole circle has to add up to 20. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna call this a third variable. I'm gonna call it both, okay? So I'm gonna call it B right here for both. So the kids that have only Facebook plus both, right, is going to be a total of 35, right? Because they either have only a Facebook account or they have both. The ones who have only a Twitter account plus both, or both, I should say. So Twitter account only or both is going to be 20. And then we have to say then that because all of the Facebook and all of the Twitter, the other way we could say that is like only Facebook plus both plus only Twitter is 40 total, right? So only Facebook plus both plus only Twitter is gonna be 40 kids. I hope that makes sense so far. So we're basically breaking it into different sections. So this is gonna be only Facebook. This is gonna be only Twitter, right? Only here, the ones that have both and the ones that have only Facebook, okay? Because we have B's here, we can rewrite everything. We want to rewrite everything as just one variable. And what we're going to do is then subtract the B on both sides so that we can rewrite the only Facebook as 35 minus B, right? Because then if we subtract B on both sides, we get 35 minus B here, all right? Which is only Facebook, right? And then only Twitter, if we subtract B on both sides, we have that only Twitter is 20 minus B. That's gonna be the only Twitter, right? So what I can do then is I can say, well, only Facebook, right, is gonna be 35 minus B. So I can rewrite that here. I can rewrite only Facebook as 35 minus B, all right? And only Twitter is 20 minus B. So I can rewrite only Twitter as 20 minus b. Why do I want to do that? Because I want to rewrite the whole thing as one variable, and I already have b here. Okay? So I'm going to rewrite this. This is plus b, right? Plus. All right, so I'm going to rewrite the whole thing as 35 minus b plus 20 minus b. Now, if you notice, we have a negative b here, positive b. That means they're going to cancel out right away, right? And then we have 35 plus 20, which is 55, minus b, the b I have left, is going to be equal to 40. I can either add the b on that side, because I like my variables to be positive, and then subtract the 40 on this side. Or I can subtract the 55 on that side if you're happy with dealing with negatives. I'm not. So I'm just going to add b to that side and subtract the 40. So this is going to be 55 minus 40 is equal to b. 55 minus 40 is 15. Right? That means that those teenagers, those teens that have both accounts is 15. So what we can do, we can replace this b here for 15. All right, so 15 kids have both accounts. Now we got to find out how many are only Facebook and only Twitter. Well, we know that 35 of them own Facebook, or own a Facebook account, right? They have a big Facebook account. That means that the ones that have only Facebook is 20. 20 plus 15 is 35, right? And those who have only a Twitter account, it's going to be only 5, because we know that it's 20 students, I guess, or teens have Twitter accounts, so 15 plus 5 is going to be 20. Okay? Now, the probability part comes in when we talk about things like, well, what is the probability that a student is going to have a Facebook account, for example, right? And honestly, to find that out, we didn't have to do the Venn diagram because they already gave it to us, right? They told us how many students have Facebook accounts. So I know that 35 of them have a Facebook account, and there's 50 students total. So the probability of a student having a Facebook account, I'm going to do FB as my Facebook variable, it's going to be 35 out of 50, right? We know, if we do it on the calculator, we know that that's going to be 0.7. It's another way to write the probability, or we can say there's a 70% chance that if we choose a student at random, right, out of the 50 students, they're going to have a Facebook account. There's a 70% chance of that, okay? If we find the probability of one of the students having Twitter, also we didn't have to do the diagram, the Venn diagram for that, because we know there's going to be 20 out of 50, or there's 20 students, or 20 teens, that are going to have a Tutor account out of 50. So that's going to be 20 out of 50, which is 0.4, which is 40%. There's a 40% probability, or 40% chance that if you choose a student at random, that student is going to have a Tutor account. All right? Now, what happens if the probability that we're looking for is the probability that the student has a Twitter and a Facebook account, right? This A, I like to think of it as a little A right here, right? It's the easiest way for me to remember which one is which. So that it has a Twitter and a Facebook account. So who has both? 15 of them. 15 students have both a Twitter and a Facebook account. All right, so that's going to be 15 out of 50, which is 0.3, which is a 30% probability that if we choose a student at random or a teen at random, they're going to have both a Twitter and a Facebook account. Now, what is the probability that it could have either or, right? So this is or, right? Or a Facebook account. I like to think of this one as like this way, right? So or, no? What works for me may not work for you. Always do what works for you. So who has either or? Well, that means that it could be any of these two circles, right? So it could be students that have only Facebook or both or only Twitter. It doesn't matter because I just want to have either or, right? So how many is that? There's going to be 40 of them. All right, so 40 students out of 50, that's going to be 0.8, which is an 80% chance that you're going to find a student that has either a Facebook or a Twitter account. And the last but not least, what would be the probability of finding a student that doesn't have a tutor account and that it doesn't have a Facebook account? No Twitter and no Facebook. Well, that's those kids over here, right? The 10 happier kids who live without the drama of Facebook or Twitter. So that's going to be 10 out of 50 students, which is going to be 0.2, which is 20%. It's a 20% chance that you're going to find a student who doesn't have either of the two.